طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. So today we've scheduled this webinar and session to discuss Bill C9 as is, and after it has passed through Justice Committee this past week, the Liberals had put a motion to expedite and end the debate on the bill in committee because it has taken because there was no it was not ending. The Conservatives were objecting and blocking and filibustering, and the Liberals are hard set on passing the bill even with all the reservations and objections from different communities. So they decided to kill that conversation and basically end the debate. So they gave them a day to finish that, and that happened this past week, where basically they went clause by clause, voted on it, and finalized the bill. So today I want to do a couple of things. One, I would like to dispel all rumors and claims and talking points that people are passing around in terms of what the bill is, because it went through different iterations. So I will talk to you about the bill as is in its final version. Okay. The second is I would like to respond to some of the talking points and some of the points that the Liberal Party is bringing in defense of this bill, and because really takes us to the third point: what is it that we're asking people for in terms of advocacy? And some of the pushback will be some of these talking points that are not accurate or not even verified. So, sorry, can I just get one final thumbs up that the stream is working on YouTube? On YouTube, yes?
Yes, the stream is working on YouTube.
Okay, perfect. طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. So Bill C9 is called the Combat Hate Bill, and it was a campaign promise by the Liberal Party, and interestingly, it was a campaign promise, and it was a push politically to balance what they consider a political give to the pro-Palestine and Muslim community in its Palestine state recognition. So in return, they want to give the opposite camp another giveaway, and that was articulated through Bill C9. And it doesn't need much proof, because from the fact of who's actually supporting the bill. The Muslim community is against the bill. The broader Christian community the Muslim community is against the bill. The Christian community is against provisions in the bill. The parts of the labor movement are against the bill. Civil liberties communities are against the bill. So there is only a couple of groups that are who are supporting the bill. Second is the bill was introduced right after a meeting with leadership from CIJA and others, and also it was announced on September 19th. September 21st was the announcement of the Palestinian state recognition. So that's the political context of that bill, and who is this for and who is this against, and so on. It's very clear. And if you remember, there was this whole debate about bubble zones and bubbles bylaws. So this was, as the Justice Department does not call this a bubble zone or a bubble. No, it's not about protest, but it actually goes beyond. And the scary part, yes, it goes beyond a bubble zone around places of worship. So this is the context of the bill. So there is nobody who can argue that this is not the context. Okay, that this is the context of the bill. Some will argue that still, even if that's the context, but still we have a mandate to combat hate. There is rise in hate and Islamophobia, and there is rise in anti-Semitism, which are all facts, and we're all against all forms of hate, include anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, hate against any particular group. but we believe that this is not the way to address it. This is not the way to challenge it. What was introduced is going to severely limit and impact our rights and freedoms. And we're going to talk about this in much more detail. Okay, so that's the first part of the context. The bill itself has multiple clauses, so it has four fundamental new offenses. So it has an obstruction and intimidation offense to places of worship. It has a new hate crime offense that basically doubles like it's an additional hate offense over any criminal offense if the hate intent is proven. Okay, so basically somebody is getting into any kind of offense, mischief, or anything, and then if the law enforcement and if law enforcement is able to identify hate motivation or proof without reasonable doubt hate motivation, then they can an additional charge that basically expands the sentencing of these charges. And then they have an offense related to that using symbols that are tied to terrorist entities in a way that intimidates and instills fear in others. And that's the fourth offense. So these offenses are by default, because this is one of the misconceptions, these offenses were instituted and initiated in this bill and do not require Attorney General consent. Okay, these offenses do not require Attorney General consent, which makes it really up to law enforcement to first of all determine if there is basically if there is if there is if they are the ones who determine if there is an offense, and they basically can arrest, they can charge, and up until it goes to court, there is no other route to challenge it except in court. So that's one part. The bill also includes a hate definition, which was very close to the Supreme Court definition. And one of the most recent amendments this past week was to fine-tune the language to make it similar to the definition by the Supreme Court. So basically, just some organizing in terms of what does hate mean in legislation, not just as a court reference. Another amendment was introduced to the original Bill C9, and that is the removal of the. So there was a clause that basically removes Attorney General consent, not from this act, from the Hate Propaganda Act. Okay, in the criminal code. So the original version removed Attorney General consent from hate propaganda. One of the approved amendments was to actually remove that clause, which keeps hate propaganda, which is a different act, which keeps the Hate Propaganda Act requiring Attorney General consent, which is this is a good amendment. However, it's an incomplete amendment because the existing legislation already does not require Attorney General consent. And more problematic is they will no longer need, like, whoever wants to charge a protester or charge somebody on grounds of hate and others, as we've seen with the encampments and the protests and all of this. Now they're not going for hate propaganda. They're going to go directly to hate crime offense through Bill C9, which is much more problematic, easier to implement, and more people are going to be arrested and charged through this bill. The final problematic amendment that was included in Bill C9 as part of the Liberals until now do not have a majority, so they had to make a deal whether with the Conservatives or the Bloc, because the NDP is against this bill. The Conservatives continued. They attempted to make some negotiations that was not successful. So the Conservatives maintained their position against the bill. The Bloc put two conditions. One was the one that was removed, the Attorney General consent one, and the second one was basically to remove, again, has nothing to do with this bill, but basically to the criminal code used to have a what we call good faith exemption provision. And this good faith exemption provision used to protect religious text, religious speech, religious sermons, and places of worship from prosecution that is tied to hate propaganda. Okay? And basically, that the state has no right to interpret religious text, context. This was all written in historic and prehistoric context, and the state is not state and law enforcement and agencies really are not equipped, and they're not the party to come and interpret. And then because you use this religious scripture, then you're doing hate motivation. And for the longest time, this protection actually, they are claiming that it's useful, is useless, but actually it proves that there's the same argument proves the exact opposite, and that is for 40 years since this was introduced, or close to 40 years, this was never used, or in that context, particularly. And on the flip side, it also proves that this was quite effective, that they did not have to use it because it is known by the law enforcement, by the attorney general, and then the courts, that these are not areas for police to intervene. And by the way, the criminal code has adequate provisions to go after hate motivation and hate intent, even under the pretext of religion. But there is a different route. So you don't start from, well, your religious teaching says this, your religious teaching say that, or your Quran says this, or the Bible says that, and then you start by saying, okay, this is going to be used and weaponized for hate. So it was a protection clause, and we all understand the intent and the agenda that the Bloc Québécois have of basically, unfortunately, anti-religion. Basically, their view of secularism is a view of basically that religion does not have space that does not have place in the public space, and they have made this part of their agenda, basically, to remove religion from public space. And they found an opportunity, even they're not even not as the major opposition, but as basically the ones who are able to be the deciding factor in the different committees, to use this leverage to introduce this in Bill C9, which was outside of Bill C9. The Liberals, unfortunately, because they really want to pass this bill, because really this was a promise that they made and they want to push through, and whatever reasoning that they have, they want to honor the deal with the bloc. However, in this past week, they introduced an amendment to attempt to bring the Muslim community, the Christian community, those who were objecting to this amendment, um, they brought an additional language in section 11.1. It's a sub-amendment, basically clarifying language. So that clarifying language includes two parts. One part is basically the intent of this bill is not to scrutinize or scrutinize religious scripture or religious sermons and all of that, like a good set of points that were made about basically this is not the intent. However, but unless this text, sermons, du'as, whatever you guys have on this part is used for hate motivation. And not just us, but even the conservatives basically said that this is not just the Muslim community, but even the conservatives and the a good portion of the Christian community have said that basically this unless part, this condition circumvents the whole premise of this language change, and we don't need it. So the conservatives introduced another amendment to remove that section and to remove that condition part. But unfortunately, in this vote last week, inside committee, they refused that amendment, and the bill passed with the language that removes the good faith exemptions from the criminal code and the hate propaganda and everything, and takes it back to new language around Bill C9, that basically that hate sermons, religious sermons and religious scripture are not the target of this bill, unless they're used for hate promotion and hate motivation. So this is the language that has been adopted. Interestingly, some of the background information, the liberals had another version that had some acceptance from the Christian community and some parts of the Muslim community, removing that condition and putting another language in place that just takes that condition part. However, the bloc, uh, uh, it seems that the bloc refused, and the liberals did not introduce any new language and just passed it as is. I'm just telling you this because there were lots of back and forth conversation. Oh, we have new language. The new language was passed. Everything was passed. Everything is okay. The current language around the amendment to remove for good faith exemption is actually not acceptable, whether neither by the Muslim community nor by the Conservative Party nor by the Christian community or portions of the Christian community. Okay, so we are back to square one. It is slightly better, but the protection under the criminal code, the previous protection is removed, and we have a clause that remains to be seen how is it going to be used. In our professional opinion and with the legal consult that we received on this will still open doors for additional scrutiny in our masajid, in our centers, in our religious scripture because of that condition. Because of that condition. The only caveat here that I was informed, so that also nobody surprises you with new information, is that because this is a language correction to the Hate Propaganda Act, which now has Attorney General, which still has Attorney General consent, it still has a check through the Attorney General. So this part of the bill alone, or I mean this modification to the good faith exemption, has some level of protection through Attorney General. However, the door is still wide open for people to bring in claims that they are motivated. This text is encouraging on hate, encouraging speech, and the argument I made to many MPs and others. I just want you to just imagine 2 years post October 7th, all the content that was recorded and pushed in terms of dua against the aggressors and dua against those who committed genocide and all of this thing. If we fast forward and forget the context, people who are gonna use this easily to make a claim that this was promotion of hate. I claim also that after a year or two in court, this is gonna be dropped, but this is going to exhaust our community, exhaust our masajid, exhaust our imams and teachers in the Islamic school. It's going to exhaust everybody because it's only going to be resolved at a later stage. So really, it is a problematic amendment on this track. I want to quickly go through the additional problematic provisions in this bill, because this is now the core of our objection to this bill. So we said we have a fundamental issue as a Muslim community and faith community with this removal of the good faith exemption, even with the language that was introduced. That's point number one. Point number two, the bill's core is around protection of places of worship. Okay. So they introduced language and they introduced a provision, a clause that basically criminalizes what they call obstruction or intimidation, obstruction and intimidation to access places of worship. Okay, and so now this is becoming a little bit more serious, because even the bubble zones bylaws are all fines. Like if you violate it, you get an injunction. So law enforcement can enforce it. But if you once you in violation initially, it's a fine. Like it's not a criminal offense. Now this is going to be upgraded to a criminal offense. The argument basically says, well, law enforcement has to prove that the obstruction and intimidation is actually um, they have to prove that it is like they have to prove that this actually has instilled fear of people and actually limited them from accessing these places, impeded their access to places of worship, to this specific place of worship that they were intending to go. Interestingly, there is already an obstruction clause in the criminal code. Like, obstruction is never the issue with protests, because protesters organize ahead of time where and how and what and in most cases obstruction is not the intent of protests. Um, the second part of intimidation, when the bill explains it, basically the meaning of intimidation is basically is to instill enough fear in a person that impedes them from access. Okay, so basically you scare people enough that they cannot go or they cannot cross to this place and so on, which is which is very open, which is very subjective. And again, the immediate question that you can who's going to determine this? It is going to be law enforcement. And police and law enforcement, the history with many of the communities was not that great and not that positive, and that's a whole objection on its own. But even in the best practices, we've already seen over the past couple of years and more, basically claims from students, oh, these protests that chant from the river to the sea, or chant this, or have these flags, or have these things, we're too scared to access our buildings. These claims already exist. It's not that these claims, like, we already know how this is going to be used. And it's now not just about give me access or change the place or move them further. It is actually about take these organizers to court, arrest them and charge them and so on with a criminal offense. So it's actually quite problematic, even at the level of only on places of worship. The problem again with this bill, because the other party, unfortunately, the other camp was quite greedy, so they actually pushed it beyond places of worship. So the clause says that the obstruction and intimidation applies to buildings that are used in part, in full, or in part by an identifiable group. And interestingly, by an identifiable group has an explanation in law, including including nationalities, gender, religion, and so on. And they did not limit it only to places of worship. They expanded it to any building. And not only these buildings are using this for religious activities, for educational activities, for recreational activities, for sports activities, which means basically any activity that is done by any specific group in any building that is used consequently or used for a long time. Okay. Which basically, and the example I gave, and people could not the other party could not refute back, basically, if, for example, and this is an example that exists. If Hillel on one campus invites an IDF soldier who was part of the genocide in Gaza, and then you have a group of pro-Palestine protesters call to organize a protest against this event that is taking place in a facility owned by this identifiable group, and that's on campus. That's the right to object to something that is almost illegal, basically to platform somebody who has committed genocide. And the fact that you're organizing could also, somebody can claim that these guys are intimidating us by calling for people to come and protest against our building, in front of our building. Second, the protest itself becomes also, the organizers of the protest also become also liable to become also responsible, and they can be some can claim that the protest that they organize is actually intimidating people from accessing this building. Okay. And those who are participating in the protest are also participating in activity if law enforcement proves that this is done in this way. Let alone بقى if they're wearing بقى kufiyas and flags and others, you can even be charged with other things as well. So really, it is actually putting chilling and limiting what you can do in terms of protest and organizing and so on. And interestingly, in the ministerial discussions ahead in this bill, like that organizing, like if that organizing is like an online campaign as well, it still can, it's like organizing online can still be subject to the scrutiny of this bill. Okay, if it's about a specific event, it's about a specific building and so on. So that takes it really into very problematic areas. So it's not just places of worship. It is not just religious activities. It's everything, right? That organized by specific groups. Moving forward, the fact that they have introduced a new hate crime offense that can be mixed with, like, coupled with any other criminal offense is also problematic because you have want to think about it. The criminal offense already exists. Like if somebody is in committing mischief, somebody who's vandalizing or doing anything, the law already exists, and the path to prosecute this person and charge him and arrest him and fine him or take him to prison is already exists. Why insist on this additional clause? One is basically it's a additional deterrence, like it's double. But two, if you think about all the training that is happening now and is going to continue to happen about the IHRA handbook and the IHRA definition, basically expanding the definition of anti-Semitism to include a lot of political jargon and political criticism of the state of Israel. And basically, if you add all this together, you will easily see how or you can see how this bill is going to be, this offense is going to be weaponized. Any additional dispute that they can bring an angle of anti-Zionism or anything into it can potentially become a compounded hate offense. Of course, and then this is a compounded hate offense, by the way, without Attorney General consent. So just law enforcement decides you guys are fighting with another identifiable party, and you are in this fight and this dispute because you are in this fight and this dispute, or because you're wearing this or wearing that, or whatever reasoning that they can put together to prove to claim that you are this is hate, then this is an additional charge that can go up to 10 and 15 years of prison. Okay, depending of the original criminal offense, which is again an abuse of that. And then finally, on the religious, the sorry, no, I'm calling it sorry, the terror-related symbols. I'm unfortunately added religious because it can be conflated with some religious symbols and religious scripture. Many of the terrorist entities, Al Qaeda and otherwise, have, for example, on their flags the Arabic scripture of the declaration of faith of the Muslim faith, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Law enforcement are not the most experts in Arabic language, and they can easily mistake La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah inscribed on somebody's t-shirt, somebody's banner, somebody's anything, and it becomes it becomes ground for a criminal offense here. Second, the colors and so they might, like, I've asked them explicitly about the Palestinian flag, and they say no, the Palestinian flag is a recognized state, but the practice that we see in terms of going after symbols, like even now, until now, politicians, until yesterday with the injunction, the attempted injunction to stop the Quds Day rally yesterday. The part of the claim is that they're using symbols and using flags and using things. We've seen the whole debate we've seen the entire debate about the kufiya in parliament and so on. Even though these are cultural symbols, religious flags, the fact that when you tie to terrorist entities, the connection that law enforcement can make, claiming X, Y, and Z from this entity was wearing this, so you cannot wear it. You cannot wear the kufiya in a particular way, or you cannot, and the fact that the bar is so low that they have to say it is actually causing fear and intimidation, because really this is the condition to. So it's not just having these symbols, but it's actually using them in a way that instills fear in a community or a group or individuals, right? But this is the claim that is made against every protest that pro-Palestinian movement is organizing. That basically, you guys are intimidating us, and even this piece, this rally for Al Quds and Al Aqsa yesterday. I don't know. You cannot convince me that this is hate promotion, because this is a legitimate right for people to express their support for what they see is right and what they see is just, and against oppression and injustice and genocide and so on. Why do they keep framing this into anti-Semitism, into promotion of hate? And unfortunately, the official version, the officials are much more impacted and influenced with that opinion. That is acceptable when it's a political debate, when it's a debate even in the media. But when it goes to when every time this is going to be weaponized and basically abusing the court system and abusing the law enforcement, this becomes really an overload on the system, and attempt to intimidate and basically prevent people from attempting to prevent people from protesting. And I just want to make one assurance that we as civil liberties organizations, we as Muslim organizations and Muslim faith organizations, our faith and our commitment to justice is deep ingrained in our hearts, including combating hate and combating injustice, all forms of injustice. And a legislation will come, and a legislation will be removed, and a legislation will be added. Our commitment is not going to waver or change. We're always going to be committed in justice at any expense. At any expense, our commitment to justice is deep, encoded in our DNA. And these attempts are all attempts to limit us, and people will see the numbers of protesters will grow. People will see our commitment to justice and against all forms of injustice is actually going to grow and grow. But we are in shock that a political deal or a political promise is more appreciated by a party that claims the exact opposite, that claims that the priority of protection of places of people of worship and communities of faith is of high priority, when this political deal and the fact that they want to push it this fast is actually mind-boggling, because they know that they are close to getting a majority in the next couple of months. So why rush? Why rush the decision? Why attempt to move in that pace? So there is a political question. We as a community, and this takes me to the final part of this session, we as a community need to tell them that our rights are a red line. Religious rights, rights to protest, right to express dissent, right to criticize the state of Israel for its wrongdoings. These are all rights that were enshrined in our Charter of Rights, and we are going to defend them all the way through, and we're going to stand for them, and they are not subject for negotiation. You're not negotiating our rights for a political gain or for political win. So that has to be a clear message that goes to all politicians. And Bill C9 is at the heart and the core of this. And second, whether specifically now to the Muslim community, our tradition has survived 1400 years through globally across the world. And Islam is taught to people through in their hearts and in their minds, and it's passed on generation by generation. We cherish and love our country here for its ability to allow everybody to practice their religion freely, to study the religion freely, to pass it from generation to generation freely. And this is a right that we cherish, and this is a primary reason for us to commit and to defend these rights and freedoms that are there. And this cannot be taken away from us. And for a deal for a short dream with the bloc, because to remove the protection from our community is something that we totally reject and we are totally against, right? So this is really something that this is a red line for us. Basically, anything close to our religious freedoms, anything against those, changing language, any theatrics around basically our attempting to limit or change our religious freedoms. If you claim that this was not used, if it's not useful, then why change it? If you claim that Bloc is hard-headed on not allowing any language change, then there must be something. Then there must be something that is going to be used. Then it must be a disadvantage to faith communities and language communities. So this is another red line that is there. And then finally, our expectation as a lobby organization and as an advocacy organization and as a community is that every MP, every liberal MP, the conservatives are against, the NDP is against, the Green is against. So it's now on the liberal MP's conscience to defend civil liberties. This is the opinion of the entire civil liberties community unanimously, the Muslim community, many in the labor movement, and many in the Christian community as well. So it's not just us. So it is on your conscience to vote for a bill, whether you're going to vote for the bill or against the bill that is going to limit religious freedom and civil liberties. This is enough of a cause, even without constituency support or constituency, your commitment to constituency. On principle, this is a bill to stand against for, and this is the bill where we are watching the vote for or against this bill. It's not another bill or another bill that can pass. And similarly, uh, you have a responsibility towards your constituency that is clear about the expectation of the MP to vote against this bill. Collectively, we have to make sure that this message is loud and clear to each MP, and they have to make the decision now. If the party changes after Senate, then our community will discuss and engage and so on. But the bill in this current form is rejected by almost everyone. So our expectation is that you vote against it completely or at least abstain. And that includes ministers, includes parliamentary secretaries, includes wannabes, people who want to be in these positions, and includes all other MPs. This is the right thing to do. The bill is horrible. You have to vote against it now. And uh, and if there is a path, and we are open to working on a path on another bill or an improved version of this bill that we can advocate the Senate for. If this happens, or when this happens, and when our community is happy with the alternative, you can then relax as a member of parliament and vote on the final version to this amended or improved version. But this current version should be totally rejected by everyone, inshallah. Sorry, I went at length because basically you will receive a lot of misinformation when you go to talk to your MPs. Oh, language has changed. So their claims that this bill is for protection. Okay, so it is about protection. It is nothing new about this bill is about protection. It's about actually intimidating faith communities and other civil liberties communities, pro-justice communities. They're going to claim that the protection is not in the good faith amendment, the protection in the Charter of Rights. The answer is very clear. Then why remove it? And then second, the challenge here is not with the final judge decision, with the process that is going to be involved to prove that this is a hate, that this is not hate, that until the court proves it, the Imam is going to be prosecuted. The community members who's advocating this online is going to be prosecuted or could be prosecuted. Some in school administration publishing material that Islamic school, the material that they might deem or might claim is also going to be prosecuted. So really, it opens the doors for this, and the language change is not adequate because it keeps this and it keeps law enforcement involved in determining if religious text is hateful or not, and this is this is not their role. Protests. They're going to claim that this bill is not against protest. Uh, there's nothing that says protest in the bill, but this bill even is going to limit protest and organizing in general, not just protest. It's actually beyond protest. They're going to claim that it's about places of worship. It is actually goes beyond places of worship and beyond the religious events. So so this is also problematic. This bill is about the symbols thing is very limited to terrorist entities, and you should not be support. Nobody supports terrorist entities, uh, and nobody supports them in or even uses this support to intimidate others and so on. Like it's very like, and if that's the case, there is also legislation that deals with this. So the problem is that this basically expands the application of symbols to religious stuff that are included in some of these symbols and could be weaponized against protesters and against organizing. And then finally, they tell you this is a campaign promise. We cannot go with the vote is going to be whipped. The MP has to take a principal position. The bill started with a campaign promise, and it is now very far from campaign promise. The block amendment was not part of the campaign promise. The symbols, terrorist symbols, are not part of the campaign promise. The expansion beyond places of worship was not. Most of the bill was not part of the campaign promise. So please go back and come up with a version that is close to your campaign promise. This is not, and you should go against it. So these are most of the arguments. If there's anything, we're ready to support you, inshallah, in discussing this. We have an FAQ that addresses these arguments. We, in good faith, also, we are ready to work. We have set recommendations and changes that can reduce the harm of this bill, and we're open to this one. But at this point, and third reading, our expectation is we get the 18-20 members to vote against the bill from the Liberal Party, and this is the job of each one here who've attended this call and others, inshallah. I'll open the floor for questions, inshallah. So please either put in the chat or the ones who are part of this meeting that we're broadcasting, you can also open the mic and ask a question or make the comment, inshallah. So there's a question on YouTube. Can a hate crime be charged on events earlier to Bill C9? Kick-off implementation. That's a very good question, and I will have to resort to a legal consult. The intent that they talk about is not retroactively, but the question could be like the way it can be proposed, and this applies is basically you can use things that happened in the past, like specifically like the religious amendment, the good faith amendment. The religious text exists. So if there is a sermon that was made prior to Bill C9, and this sermon can be used beyond after the date, because it is about intent to instill fear. If that content still exists, like if that sermon still is alive online, then technically they can basically claim that this sermon is people are using this sermon to intimidate people and instill hate and impede access and all of these things. So really, if this at least the part I can answer is if these claims are things that outlived, like is continuously alive in online or otherwise or in published material, then maybe they can still use it. But can they go back and charge you for something that was done under this bill 2 years ago? I am not sure, and I will have to go back to legal consult. There's a much longer question. MP in Brentford, Conservative member Larry Brock, and we know the Conservatives are very pro-Zionist. I'm surprised that our MP is against the bill, but I can't help but think they are against the bill for a more selfish reason, as are most of the Conservatives against the bill. How does being against the bill benefit them? We don't really have to go into the psyche of each individual Conservative member of the Conservative Party, but they have a very clear position. And they've made it very explicit. One is they don't trust, they vote against the Liberal Party because they don't trust that this legislation is done in the best way. So they have an objection to how the bill is, to how they approach national security, how do they approach legislative reform and criminal code reform and so on. So they have fundamental issues against the Liberal Party introducing bills this way. Because also, when this bill is introduced with all these flaws, we can we can in the bad implementation of this bill after, this can also go through a charter challenge and eventually be changed in a few years down the line. But up until that, up until that charter challenge, which is going to take 3 to 5 years, we're all going to suffer as a community from these from this bill. But then the second part is the Conservative Party has a clear Christian constituency, a good Christian base, and they align on issues, and particularly when it came to this amendment on good faith, on removal of good faith exemption from the criminal code. Basically, this hits a good portion of their base, and honestly, it hurts the liberals as well. Uh, so the conservatives are using this to support their base and to represent their base, and also to hurt the liberals with the Christian base as well, and as you can see now, also with the Muslim community base. Other questions? What can we say to those who say the places of worship are considered private spaces and not public? Uh, sorry, I'm trying to understand the question. So the question here is basically, so there is an argument that place of worship must be protected because it's a private space. Yes, so nobody's against, by the way, nobody's against protection of private spaces, places of worship. We're actually for. We are impacted. Many Islamophobic attacks are against our place of worship. So we are for protection of place of worship. It's not that we're against it, but it has to be protected. Oh, first of all, it is already protected under, like there is already trespassing laws on private property. There are already laws against vandalism and provocation, and there is a whole suite of legislation that's protecting places of worship in the way that is described here. And also in our perception, in our understanding and belief that not as like in general, that protests are not about, like, the right to protest is not about attacking and invading place of worship. It's actually the exact opposite. The right to protest is actually about to express, to depoliticize, or basically to I don't know what these celebrations is, to express it's express legitimate dissent in general, legitimate dissent to whatever practices that are out there in the community, in the communities, or by government, or by other regimes, and so on. And this right protest does not trump people's protection and people's safety and people's private spaces. And we've had over 2 years of protests post October 7th with almost negligible incidents of infringement on places of worship. The one incident that they talk about of protest, and there was participants from multiple faith groups, when synagogues were involved in sales, in a real estate sales event for real estate sales event for illegal settlements, for parts in illegal settlements. So that was really, the protest was against the sale. It was not against the synagogue or Jewish people or anything. And there were even Jewish congregants and ex-rabbis and people who were involved who were actually objecting to use this place of worship for an illegal activity. And by the way, none of these protesters actually attempted to invade or to block even access to these places of worship. They were simply against this incident and this event. So we were not advocating against places of worship. Actually, it's the opposite, and we're not. We're not with the opinion that protests are about actually obstruction and intimidation. They're about legitimate dissent. Any questions? Any additional questions here or on YouTube? Oh, why are so many of our Muslim liberal MPs for this bill? This is so damaging to our cause and creates a bigger battle to convince our non-Muslim MPs. I don't want to turn this into Muslim MPs versus non-Muslim MPs issue. I think primarily because like Liberal Party members are at first Liberal Party members. Okay, they went into with the mandate, with the under the party banner, under the party agenda. they lobbied and campaigned. They campaigned and got support as Liberal Party. So the default is that they support the party position. It's not the other way around. Like when they go against the party, it is a big deal for them and for the party. So that's the part. That's the initial part. Second, and this is where you can criticize them a little bit, is basically they take the party talking points really, they take it, they believe it more than, like they want to believe the party talking points and the party defense of different things. We've seen this with Bill TC 233. We see this with the Bill C9 and others. Like they go, it takes us a lot of time to show them that some of these talking points are not accurate and the harm and damage still exists. I personally believe that they're all genuine people. Like they, in the interest of our community, they're not against the interest of the community. It's about how much they assess two things: the harm and the benefit of that political decision or that legislation, and then the other part, how far can they be impactful in the party, whether if they're in a more senior, if they get into a more senior position, if they have access to a more senior position, if they're privy to bigger conversations on policy ahead of time and so on. So they want to prioritize how impactful they should be, whether to oppose it outside or to do as much as they can on the inside and to try to negotiate internally. And many of them do. And we expect that they do this internally. But unfortunately, we reached a point where the party is, there is no longer internal debate. The bill is out there. They advocated internally. The party did not listen to our community, did not listen to other communities, did not listen to civil liberties, and the party insisted on moving forward with this bill. Our expectation now is there is no clarity. There is no liberal talking points anymore, right? There are no promises. This is the bill that you guys are voting for. This is a harmful bill. Vote against it. I think this is a clear message, and they have to make it clear. We are going to launch a tracker of how MPs are going to vote, and we're going to launch it, inshallah, very soon. And we want you to approach the MP and let them know that the community is watching this particular vote, inshallah. Okay. I meant the bill. So there's a follow-up question. Bill C9 will not affect people in private places such as mosques or churches, making dua prayers or sharing religious teaching. It's only when it is done in public space. No, this is not accurate. The way this, like you look at, for example, memory in the United States. So what does memory do? They record any Muslim activity online, or if they have access to a recording, and they take it out of context and they push it and they create PR campaigns around it and so on. So similarly, somebody records something inside a masjid or in an Islamic event, in a Muslim event, or if this was online and then they record it, and basically somebody, I would say legitimately or illegitimately, claims that these teachings, these du'as, these are this is, I'm so intimidated. It is actually, I'm so scared. I can't even pass in front of that masjid, or I can't even access my synagogue. I'm so worried that I'm going to be impacted by these messages. They're in fueling people with hatred against us as a people, and so on. And I'm going to take this to law enforcement. Now there is legislation that allows it, so please take action. Okay, so this is how it's going to be used. People will go make claims in front of law enforcement. What will police do if it's legitimate enough? Like if it's not somebody who's like if it's legitimate enough, they're going to take it. They're going to start an investigation. Well, who said this? Who did this? Let's bring this imam for questioning. Let's see the person who's promoting this on social media. Why is he promoting this? Does he have an agenda? Does he have other posts that are anti-Semitic in his feed? And then they start an investigation, and this can just go to almost everybody. Start the investigation. The next step, okay, this person has an X flag on his profile, or he liked this video, and then you take it. You can just imagine how this can process and proceed, and basically you have a case, and potentially after a year or so, when it goes to court, and you have another deliberation in front of court, and you pay of this, the judge dismisses all of this. But this is all exhaustion. This is all opening our masajid, our sermons, and everything to this kind of practice. There is another question. Is there any statistics or information we can use to create infographics maps to help us push and visualize our points? Also, when is the hard deadline for the vote on this bill? So we, if you follow our social media, CMPAC at CMPAC online, whether on Meta or Twitter, you will find us pushing as much social media kits. Or if you join our WhatsApp groups in our local teams, you can. We pass these campaigns all the time. So we have multiple rounds of campaigns explaining Bill C9. We're gonna do another set, inshallah, this week related to this final bill that is being voted on, and answering these specific talking points. So we published this. By the way, CCLA has published a statement. ICLMG is publishing a statement. I know I was speaking to CMLA, Canadian Muslim Law Association. They also have a position and a brief that's going to be published later at a later time. So everybody has clear position. Labor PSAC from the labor group has already also published a statement against this. So it's there is a lot of content out there, but we need to really be super organized and not be distracted by the liberal talking points. The timeline is so committee voted, so committee is done. So the committee has to produce a report that goes to the parliament, and we expect this goes in the parliament is off next week. So this is why we have maximum campaigning. The MPs are in their offices this coming week, and we are waiting for them, inshallah, during Eid to share with them our polite, professional opinion about Bill C9 if they come. If they're too intimidated and they fear that community is backlash, then they should vote against it. But if they come, the community, I'm sure, are going to be very vocal about their position. So we have a fun week with the MPs this week when they're back in their constituency office, and then on the 23rd, the parliament comes back. They're going to vote on that report that comes basically to accept the report from the committee. And then the motion to expedite basically says they have 1 day to vote, and a maximum of 1 day to vote on the report, and then a maximum of another day to vote for third reading. Okay, so they're going to deliberate for 1 day for the report and 1 day for third reading. So technically, it can be done right the week of the 23rd. If there are other priority agenda items like priority bills that they want to push forward, it's going to be pushed. My expectation, if we do our good job of pushback, they might delay and wait for the majority, and then they might. But this is the lesser option. But we never know. We've been through this several times, and subhanallah, when we do what we're supposed to do, basically we're voicing our legitimate opinion that this is a harmful bill to our community, to our civil liberties. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens doors that other delays, other things that can happen, and so on. So our tactic is to push as much as we can for MPs to vote against, and to delay this as much as we can. Maybe when the liberals also get a majority, they don't have to make all these changes, and maybe they become a little bit more arrogant, and then they just push it through the way it is. So our minimum red line, they at the very least need to know that this will cost, if this bill goes through, it is going to cost them the relationship with the Muslim community in a very deep way. This is not like a peripheral bill, especially with the block amendment. This is something that goes to the core of our community. طيب, so some are asking for additional webinars. So this is going to be available on YouTube so people can access it, inshallah. We have other resources. If people want to organize town halls or want to organize conversation with the masjid, inshallah, our local teams or us here even nationally, we can contribute support. We can give you presentations. People can go to speak. We can even bring people from other communities, from other organizations. So I think يعني this can be helped and facilitated, inshallah. So if you're a local organizer, we can support you and we can help you with this. Are there any more questions? Okay, so inshallah, we'll do a recap of this. Inshallah, produce something out of this that you can use. We'll produce infographics and FAQs and stuff, inshallah, over the next few days. So please, can somebody put on the YouTube channel how to join our WhatsApp groups, and link to our website and so on, so that people can sign on and receive these updates. I just want to end by two things actually. One is really heartfelt shout out to CMLA, Canadian Muslim Lawyers Association, NCCM, National Canadian Council for Muslims, and ACLA, Arab Canadian Lawyers Association, for their like instantaneous response against the injunction by the Ford government, by the Ontario government against the Quds protest yesterday, and they managed, alhamdulillah, to stand in front of the court and to dismiss this. This is really really good work, and we support them on it, and we applaud them for it. And similarly, I also want to commend the MPs who voted, especially the ones who voted against, voted for Bill C-233, the bill introduced by MP Jenny Kwan to close the loopholes on arms sales through the US. The 15 MPs, especially who voted against their party line, this is a principled position, and we encourage you, to continue to do so. And those who also abstained, because it's not a tough thing to stay away from the course of your party. So that's an honorable position, and encourage you all to thank them for this. However, MPs who talk about political capital and political credit with the party, honestly, this is understood, and this is the pressure that you guys are under. But we are at historic times. We're on an inflection time. Whether our government basically hears very loud feedback and falls back in place when it comes to respecting rights and liberties, whether through this bill or other bills, or they continue on a path that basically makes Canada a much more difficult place to live in terms of liberties and freedoms. This is why this is a time where we've seen pandemic, a genocide, and live streamed. This is a time where you stick to your principles, you stick to what we believe Canada is about, and you continue to do so. And I assure you, the party should realign when they see opposition on the street, they see opposition through organized lobbying and advocacy and from communities, and when they see opposition from within their party. Be firm and be clear and be principled, and know that your constituency, our communities are all behind you when you take these positions. Even if you lose political capital within your party, the party will adjust, and the party eventually will respect you. So that's a message to the parliamentarians that you can talk to, inshallah. And we've seen, by the way, other ministers during the genocide who voted against their party on some of these positions and participated in rallies supporting the genocide. So when it comes to supporting justice, when it comes to supporting our communities, we expect even ministers to do the right thing, inshallah, and parliamentary secretaries. I'll leave you with this. I think I said enough, and I've explored a lot of avenues. Inshallah, we can organize a follow-up session with CMLA. They said that they have lawyers who can even go in if people have specific legal questions as well in the future, inshallah. With the FAQs that we're going to send also some examples. I gave some examples as I explained the different parts of the bill, but we'll put them in more concrete ways, inshallah, in the material that we share. But please, at the very least, communicate directly to your MP. Tell him we expect you to vote against, and we're watching we're watching this vote very closely. Jazakumullah khairan, everybody. Inshallah, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of you in these blessed days, and inshallah in this dua, make this part of our dua. This is part of protecting our deen, parting of protecting our heritage for the future of our future and the future of our children. This is part of our this is part of our struggle against injustice. So please keep it in your dua, in these blessed days, and inshallah we have a favorable outcome. And at the very least, we are in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We've done our best, and sometimes that best and that struggle is what teaches our children, what teaches the young people, that we do what we do at any cost, inshallah. And that's maybe the example that keeps them going and keeps them take on the banner and continue to protect and preserve this deen for everybody to follow. جزاكم الله خيرا. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك، نشهد ان لا اله الا انت، نستغفرك ونتوب اليك. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر الانسان لفي خسر الا الذين امنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله.